Hello everybody, so today we're talking about semicolon. I see essentially four uses for semicolon. So the first one is you want to link two related statements. Yes, you could use a period, but it would be really a long pause in between the two statements. If you use a semicolon, it's not as fast of a pause as a comma, but it's not a definite pause like a period. So, for example, Veronique went to the bakery. She plans to serve cake this evening. She went to the bakery and then she bought a cake and then she's going to serve cake this evening. If you want to make that link between the two statements, then you would put a semicolon in written form. I mean, when you're speaking, you don't say comma, period, semicolon. It's the length of your pauses that actually give the punctuation. But when you're writing, that semicolon really makes the link between the two statements. So Veronique went to the bakery. She plans to serve cake this evening. The second instance that you would use semicolon is in front of words such as however, therefore, for instance, those kind of words that basically introduce another statement. So, for example, Veronique went to the market. However, she did not buy any tomatoes. Two statements linked by however. Well, in front of however, you put a semicolon, and by the way, after however, you put a comma. So, Veronique went to the market, semicolon, however, comma, she did not buy any tomatoes. Now, the fourth instance, when you should use a semicolon, is when you give a list that has units within the series. I'm going to give you an example because I'm sure that's not really clear. Veronique went to Sydney, Nova Scotia, Paris, Texas, St. Petersburg, Florida, and Antigua, Guatemala. When I say it, you know what I'm saying, because I'm saying Veronique went to Sydney, Nova Scotia, Paris, Texas, St. Petersburg, Florida, Antigua, Guatemala. You know that it's Sydney that's located in Nova Scotia because I paused after Nova Scotia. It wasn't a period, it wasn't that long of a pause, but it wasn't a comma either where I just rambled on. It was enough of a pause that you understood it's Sydney, Nova Scotia, not Sydney, Australia, right? Paris, Texas. You understood, I paused after Texas. You understood that it's Paris located in Texas, not Paris, France, right? Same with St. Petersburg, and so on. When it's in written form, you need to be able to do the same as when you speak, putting that pause in. You have to put a semicolon between the units, right? So, Sydney, Nova Scotia, semicolon. Paris, Texas, semicolon. Between Sydney and Nova Scotia, comma. Paris, comma, Texas, semicolon. St. Petersburg, comma, Florida, semicolon. And Antigua, Guatemala. There you go. Now people will know that you're not saying Sydney, Nova Scotia, Paris, Texas, etc. If you had put only commas in between those words, people would think you went to Sydney, wherever that Sydney is, you went to Nova Scotia, then you went to Paris, whichever Paris that is, whether it's Paris, France, or Texas, then you went to Texas, then you went to St. Petersburg, maybe it was in Russia. No, or maybe it was in Florida. But they wouldn't know that because you put commas in between. The only way they know that you're talking about St. Petersburg, Florida, is if you put St. Petersburg, comma, Florida, semicolon. That way they know that the St. Petersburg goes with the Florida. You see? And finally, the fourth instance is when you have connector words such as and, but, or, nor, those kind of words, right? That connect two separate thoughts, two separate phrases or sentences or statements. So in those cases, right in front of the connector word, you put a semicolon. So for example, Veronique loves cats, dogs, and birds, but she does not like snakes. Well, it was a semicolon in front of the but. Okay? Because two separate thoughts. One is you love things, that's one thought. The other one is you do not love things. You hate those things. That's a second thought. So you're linking the two thoughts with a but. And that but, you put a semicolon in front. I know most people put a comma, but no, it should be a semicolon. Of course, there's different instances where people actually use semicolon when they shouldn't. So don't use semicolon when you should use a colon. If you're making a list, like with bullets or 1, 2, 3 or things like that, you don't introduce it with a semicolon. You use a colon, okay? And then what else? Oh, the other thing is after a semicolon, there's no capital. So it's not a new sentence, it's a continuation. So no need for a capital after a semicolon. So here are the uses. Hope you have fun using semicolon from now on when you write.